With over 7 million views on my social media posts every month, I'm now getting thousands and thousands of comments on my posts about abortion. Today in this episode, I'm going to expose the 12 most common pro-abortion comments I get and why they're based on lies. And that's today on The Dr. Jo Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get into the episode, can I please ask that if you're new here, you hit the subscribe button and subscribe to this channel. The more people that do, the bigger our movement grows. So I'm going to dive straight in without any preamble. This comment, babies are not born alive and left to die, is something I get all the time when I talk about this issue. So this one from Jazzy Princess. Hello, people. Sounds like nonsense. Who is this woman? A retired RN. Where is the proof? People do anything these days for attention. This wouldn't be ethical in Australia at all. And then from Ros Nelson 13, what a load of rubbish and rot. Seriously. Now, this was in response to an interview that I put on my YouTube page with Kathy, a retired nurse from New South Wales, and it's a really must-watch interview, but she shares how in a hospital, little babies would be born alive after their abortion and then dumped in this medical waste stream and covered with cloths over their faces, and they'd just be lined up. And then sometime later, it would be someone's job to check that they'd died, to record their death. And she talks in that interview about going home and just sitting on her chair on a porch and just being in tears after a day like that at work, and just how horrible it is. So people say that doesn't happen. I wanted to show you guys just the data straight from the source. So this is from the Consultative Council on Obstetric and Paediatric Mortality and Morbidity. It's an annual report that comes out from the Victorian Health Department. They produce it every year. There's often a delay in their reporting, so we haven't got the last couple of years, but this one is from 2020. Now, what you can see is this is a table that is about late-term abortion, so abortions after 20 weeks, perinatal deaths as a result of termination of pregnancy. You can see that in the first line, termination for suspected or confirmed congenital anomaly. So this is a baby that is disabled or is suspected of having a disability. Doesn't say how serious it is. Stillbirths, 170, that's the number. So 170 babies after 20 weeks and up until birth in Victoria in 2020 were born dead. That's because they were killed first through an injection of poison and delivered dead. But then look at this, under neonatal deaths, it says 43. So neonatal death means that the baby survived birth, so survived their abortion, they were born alive with signs of life, and then they subsequently died within the first 28 days. 43 babies survived their abortion, their termination of pregnancy in 2020, and then subsequently died. So babies are born alive, and it's not rot, it's actually true, and what Kathy says is true in this interview. Line number 2 that I commonly get in my comments, babies who survive their abortion do not get autopsies. So look at this comment from Tara Jane Piggott. She says, as much as I would love to continue, I just can't be bothered responding to people who are obviously uneducated, have no idea of the reality of what is going on in this world and aren't in the healthcare industry. Also, the subject of this video has nothing to do with legal abortion. This is literally about miscarried children. Pathology and autopsies aren't done on fetuses that are aborted. So don't you love this? Because she's claiming the intellectual and moral high ground and saying that babies who survive their abortions do not get autopsies, although she doesn't call them babies. She uses the dehumanizing language of fetuses, even though they are clearly a baby because they've survived their abortion. But let's just quickly flick up on the screen the inquest into Jessica Jane by Coroner Greg Kavanagh in the Northern Territory, who details quite forensically how Jessica Jane survived her abortion, born at about 22 to 23 weeks. Her mother had lied and said she was about 19 weeks pregnant. Jessica comes out alive, has excellent ABCAR scores, and is left on a metal kidney dish for 18 minutes before she dies. And she's perfectly healthy. So she would be alive today if they had actually given her care after birth. Also, this coroner's report from New South Wales, from Westmead, a little baby that had a heart problem, was born alive. The parents did hold the baby initially after the birth, but then the baby was just dumped in a medical waste bin while still alive and found some hours later. The chain of custody was lost on this baby, and the coroner, Janet Stevenson, says there was a total abrogation of responsibility on behalf of the people whose duty it was to care for this child. So Tara Piggott, yep, there's coroner's reports into these babies who survived their abortions. There aren't a lot of coroner's report because most of the time it gets swept under the rug and covered up, but there are a few. And that's a fact. Comment number 3, and I get this one all the time, and actually this is perpetuated actively by pro-abortion politicians like Shannon Fentinan in Queensland, who say that babies who survive their abortion aren't really alive. Now, the academic literature actually just really clearly shows that they are. For example, this article in the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology by Stephanie Springer and her research team shows that in 241 late-term abortions where feticide wasn't given first, so there wasn't that injection of poison into the baby's heart, the baby came out alive. 1 in 2 babies in that study came out alive, and the average survival time was 32 minutes, and one baby even survived for 267 minutes, so over 4 hours. Clearly that baby is alive, and indeed in the biggest longitudinal study that was published in 2024 about second trimester abortion and the risk of live birth, this actually looked at over 13,000 abortions in Canada between 1989 and 2021. And this study actually found that there was an incidence of live births, 11.2% between 15 to 29 weeks. And actually one baby in that study lived for a day. So lived for 24 hours. So when people like Shannon Fentinan, who was the Queensland Minister for Health and the Minister for Women, say, oh, well, these babies aren't really alive, well, they clearly are. The next comment I get very often is that late-term abortions do not kill healthy, viable babies. So Tracy RG writes, no one has a late-term abortion at 23 weeks with a viable pregnancy. Shame on you for judging mothers and fathers that have had to make the toughest decision of their life. No perfectly healthy baby has been aborted at 23 plus weeks. At 23 plus weeks, a mother wants the baby. They just have this option to do what is right for the baby, to stop the suffering or if the mother's life is at risk. Shame on you. And again, really just not true when we bring up the facts, Tracy RG. So we'll flick up these reports from South Australia. This clearly shows, and there's 2 reports here in Table 6 and 6A, it shows that actually in the first 6 months of South Australia's abortion up to birth laws, 8 healthy babies were injected in the heart with poison and delivered dead. 0 late-term abortions were for the mother's life, like there was 0, her life was not at risk. And then the following 12 months, we can see 37 babies, 80% of the late-term abortions, healthy babies with mums in non-life-threatening circumstances. So when she says, shame on you for judging, well, I do judge. If you're injecting a healthy baby whose mum her life is not at risk, you're just doing it completely unnecessarily. It's completely needless and it shouldn't happen. And we should judge that because you're killing an innocent baby violently and brutally, and it just shouldn't happen. That's precisely the sort of thing we should judge. And if we don't judge it, then it actually says a lot about how dark our society has become. Now, I get this next one all the time about how abortion up to birth is not legal. Babies after 22 weeks doesn't happen. So Mr. Chloe, he says, why are you spreading misinformation? In Australia, defined by state, whatever that means, you can receive an abortion for any reason up to 22 weeks. After 22 weeks, in some cases, you are still given the right to an abortion if agreed by 2 doctors, where they will consider your health, medical and other needs as an individual. Abortions after 22 weeks do not just happen for no reason. Now, first of all, in every state and territory, the jurisdiction, like the gestational limit is different. So this guy says, oh, it's just after 22 weeks. Well, that's not actually true. It's different in different states. So in Victoria, it's 24 weeks. Tasmania, it's 16 weeks. New South Wales, 22 weeks. South Australia, 22 weeks and 6 days. So different states have different gestational limits. But what is universal in all of these states and territories is that after the gestational limit and right up until birth, you can have an abortion for any reason. So if we just pull up the first state to do this, Victoria, the Abortion Law Reform Act in 2008, Section 5, it clearly says that abortion is available after 24 weeks. That's why they have this section in the law. And sometimes I feel like a broken record when I'm responding to people in the comments. You know, why is there a law that says termination of pregnancy after 24 weeks if it's not available after 24 weeks? And then if we look at the actual text of Section 5, it says considering whether the abortion is appropriate in all the circumstances, the doctor has to take into account the woman's current and future physical, psychological and social circumstances. So that basically means anything that is affecting the woman right now or into the future, both her physical, mental or socioeconomic well-being, all of it is taken into account. So it says basically there isn't a reason that you could give that wouldn't be acceptable to get a late-term abortion right up until birth. I'm often getting this comment about the 2-doctor rule being a real check and balance because, you know, why would 2 2 doctors sign off on an abortion. So Katrin AU writes, after 20 weeks, 2 doctors need to sign off that it is medically necessary. Surely you aren't suggesting we remove access to medically necessary abortions. Well, it's a false premise. There is no medically necessary late-term abortion. It's just completely unnecessary. And especially when you've got a healthy baby with a mum who's not in a life-threatening circumstance, there is just no reason to kill that baby. And so when people say, oh, well, 2 doctors would never do that, it's just total BS, because all you have to do is rock up to an abortion provider. They have 2 doctors on site whose business it is to do abortions. They are in the job of killing babies. That's what they do. And so they sign off. The second doctor doesn't even need to see the woman. They just need to have looked at her file to sign off on that abortion. That's how little a check and balance it is. It's no check at all. And in fact, this article from the Sydney Morning Herald clearly shows that you can really kill a baby for any reason, because this is a Chinese couple who says, our baby was 28 weeks old. She had one hand that was not quite right, just a club fist. That's all it was. Everything else about this little baby girl was perfect. But because back in China, babies with disabilities are discriminated against, they shopped around for someone who would kill their baby, and they found someone at 28 weeks. 2 doctors signed off on it to kill that healthy baby girl at 28 weeks just because she had the minorest of disabilities. I mean, that shows you, it exposes how easy it is to get a late-term abortion. This is the biggest lie that the pro-abortion industry tells, which is that women are going to die if they can't access abortions. 2782me wrote on my page, no woman wants to abort that late in the pregnancy. She has to, because otherwise she will die and or the baby will suffer trying to breathe. Nicole Natalie also writes, ultimately, these kind of anti-abortion are not pro-life for women. Most women who have late-term abortions are faced with devastating health issues and complications. Please don't take away women's healthcare. Women will die. There are several cases of death and disability in Texas because of the laws this woman is pushing. Now, again, this is just total BS, because you never need to kill the baby in a late-term termination of pregnancy. Like, there's no medically necessary reason to do that, which is why South Australian data clearly shows that there's 0 cases where a late-term abortion has been needed to save the mother's life. But if we actually look at the hospital operating procedure that Australian hospitals use for a late-term abortion, this one's from the Royal Hospital for Women, we can see really clearly that what they're doing, what the procedure is they enter the amniotic cavity under ultrasound visualization with a 20G needle. So they're doing an ultrasound of the baby and they enter with a needle. They aim for intracardiac injection. So they inject the baby's heart and then they aspirate fetal blood to confirm the correct needle placement. They've got to get it right because that needle is filled with poison and they can't get that in the woman. They need to get it in the baby. Then inject KCl, which is potassium chloride, and you can see the dosage increases. So in the first trimester, it's 1 to 2 mils, second trimester, 5 mils, third trimester, 10 mils. The reason you need a bigger dosage is because you've got a bigger baby, so you need more poison. This clearly shows that you're killing babies in the third trimester, by the way. And then you watch for acetol, which is the heart has stopped, and then you inject more poison up to a volume of 10 mils if it didn't work the first time. What that clearly shows is the objective of that procedure is to kill the baby. There is nothing else that's going on in that late-term abortion other than the sole, sick, monstrous objective of wanting to kill that baby. This isn't about women dying, because that woman, once her baby has been pre-killed, she's given labour-inducing drugs and she then has to go through labour to deliver that baby. Now, if her life was truly at risk, if she's in a situation where she's got emergency preeclampsia, some kind of threatening situation where her life is at risk, they would do an emergency C-section to get the baby out. They're not going to go through this very time-consuming 12 to 48-hour process of a late-term abortion, of doing the ultrasound, finding the baby's heart, killing the baby, and then inducing labour. All of that, if the woman's life was genuinely at risk, that would endanger her life further. So when commenters say to me, women are going to die unless they can access late-term abortion, it is just the biggest lie that the abortion industry tells, that is propagated by pro-abortion media, that commenters have just accepted without any level of critical thinking. Now, this next lie is one that gets repeated time and time again from people like Hannah Ferguson, pro-abortion media personalities, to just your average commenter. This one, Alexandra Madden, I think she's got a bit of a big following, but she wrote, I don't know where you get all your facts from. Where are your peer-reviewed journal articles to back up your statistics and claims? Considering that late-term abortions make up roughly 5% of all abortions and the vast majority of those are for severe fetal anomalies or where the pregnancy is a risk to the mother's life, I don't know why you think you should get a say in that. And considering you don't have have any understanding of individual women's circumstances like domestic violence, unstable housing and income, I don't think you should judge or try and use fear-mongering videos to try and convince people that your personal beliefs should be law. I've never used my personal beliefs to justify anything on abortion. I use science and philosophy. This particular video that she's commenting on is a late-term abortion procedure video that is entirely factual. She just can't handle the fact that video has reached so many people, tens of thousands of people across this country. And everything she writes in that is just total BS, which we're going to deal with in a minute. But let's just talk about Harry Keck's comment. 1% of abortions occur at this late stage due to the unviability. If you believe in the life of the mother as an exception, you believe in this process. Don't let this person fearmonger you away from reason and science. Don't you love how these guys appeal to peer-reviewed journal articles and reason and science to justify a late-term abortion because it's necessary to save the mother's life? It is not, as we've talked about in this video already, but let's use a peer-reviewed journal article just because these guys love it so much. This journal article, estimating the abortion rate in Australia from National Hospital Morbidity and Pharmaceutical Benefit Scheme data. It says the total number of abortions for all women during 2017 to 18 was therefore 88,287. So this is actually the most recent study we've got, which is crazy because it is it was 7 years old now. So it says there's over 88,000 babies who are killed by a late-term abortion. Now, my response to Harry Keck and Alessandra Madden is even if late-term abortions are 1%, let's go with the lower figure, give them the benefit of the doubt, that's still close to 1,000 babies every year who are needlessly having their hearts injected with poison and delivered dead. You know, Alessandra Madden raises domestic violence situations and difficult personal circumstances that a woman may face. Well, if a woman was in a domestic violence situation, how does it help her to inject her baby's heart with poison and deliver that baby dead? She still goes back to that situation of domestic violence. It's far better for that woman. This was clearly a woman that wants to have that baby. She's carried it too late in pregnancy. A better situation would be to deliver that baby alive and give care to that mother and genuinely find exit strategies for her out of that domestic violence situation. But, you know, it's so much easier for the left to say, oh, well, abortion is the fix-all. It fixes everything, when it clearly doesn't. I get this comment a lot. No babies are killed in the third trimester or at full term. And, you know, I wish Instagram would let me flick up screenshots so that I could show, but you can't, and you can't even put clickable links on Instagram. But this clearly shows you, you know, here was a little baby killed at 37 weeks in Victoria, perfectly healthy for a maternal condition. So this was a condition to do with the mother. A termination for a psychosocial indication. So nothing wrong physically with the mother, and the baby's perfectly healthy. And this little baby was killed at 37 plus weeks. So babies are killed in the third trimester and right up until birth. And in fact, this same year, 10 babies were killed between 28 weeks to 31 weeks. Now, these are babies with a 96% chance of survival if born alive at 28 weeks. Another comment I get is women do not get paid to have late-term abortions. This is a lie. And in fact, Charmaine Connolly, she wrote, I never knew you could receive a payment for $4,225 for feticide in Australia. And this happens even without a birth or death certificate. We need serious, urgent birth equality laws and changes. Jem's right, at Charmaine Connolly, you can't, she is wrong. And actually, it's Gems that's wrong, because the stillborn parenting payment clearly says that to be considered stillborn, a baby has to have had a gestation period of at least 20 weeks or weighed at least 400 grams until birth, and the payment is $4,225. And as this front page story shows, where the Department of Human Services is quoted, they don't actually know how many happened because of a late-term abortion. They don't want to look into that. They don't want people to find out. But they do not deny the fact that it's available, because if you have a late-term abortion, your baby is born stillborn. It's intentionally stillborn, but it is stillborn, and so you can then get this payment because you've met the criteria, and there's nothing in the criteria that says you can't have deliberately killed your baby. The final comment that we're going to look at today is this one, and it's about the fact it's a lie that the pro-abortion side tells themselves to make them feel better, that babies can't feel anything in a late-term abortion. In fact, this Instagram user wrote, cool, so it didn't feel anything, now get off my page. But let's look at a peer-reviewed journal article because they love to look at peer-reviewed journal articles. This one is about reconsidering fetal pain, published very recently. It's actually a meta-analysis of all of the studies of fetal pain, and I love this article because it's written by a pro-abortion and anti-abortion scholar, and they've done it together to try and reconcile all of the information about fetal pain. They clearly say that, abortions before 13 weeks gestation do not involve any meaningful likelihood of pain for the fetus, but then they recognize that after that, there is likely some experience of pain. And they even talk about the two common methods of surgical abortion after 13 weeks, which is fetal death following direct feticide, which is an injection of potassium chloride directly into the heart, or an injection of digoxin directly into the fetus, or dilation and evacuation, which is when the cervix is dilated, the amniotic fluid is drained, and the fetus is removed in pieces via several surgical maneuvers using grasping forceps. Even that is something that I think everybody needs to know, that method in the second trimester of a D&E is the cervix is dilated and the fluid is removed. And then the fetus is removed in pieces using grasping motions by metal forceps. And so that's pulling off the baby's arms and legs. And I was arguing with a friend of mine, a good friend, who is anti-abortion, and she's been trained as a midwife. And she said, we don't do D&E. She'd seen it on my page, on my Instagram page. And she just said to me, Jo, that is not something that gets done in South Australia. Like, we don't do D&Es. That'd be dangerous for the mother. And we just don't do it. She's like, I think you need to know this because it's misinformation. And I just said to her, well, I sent her this article, which isn't about Australia, but it is about the fact that this is a legitimate abortion procedure that's used worldwide. But then I sent her the screenshot from the South Australian reports that get produced every year where they show the method of abortion and how many babies were killed. And in 2023, 480 babies were killed via dilation and evacuation. And her mind was blown because she's been through university here. No one's ever told her, no one's ever trained her that this is something they do behind closed doors. They rip the babies' bodies apart. And in South Australia, 480 babies at a gestation where they can actually feel pain because they're older than 13 weeks. So this is just horrific stuff. All of it. Nobody knows. And so that's why the war is in the comments section. So I encourage you to use the information that I've shared with you today to share with other people and to get busy in the comments, because when you write comments, you share the truth, and it's one little thing you can do. We have to take back our culture because we have the most extreme abortion laws in the world, and the way we take it back is with the truth. So thank you for watching, and that's today on The Dr. Jo Show.